Welcome to the EcoBusiness podcast. I'm Jessica Chiam, founder and managing director of EcoBusiness, and we are Asia Pacific's largest sustainability media platform. This week, we're launching an exciting new series on the EB podcast called Climate Tech in Asia. And today, as my very first guest on this series, we have invited Horace Luke, who has a vision of transforming urban mobility in Asia, as our guest. He is the current Chief Executive Officer of Gogoro, an electric scooter company that provides a unique battery swapping ecosystem. Gogoro made its listing debut in New York last month and raised some $335 million at an enterprise value of over $2 billion. Having dominated Taiwan, its home country, in the two-wheeler battery swapping space, Gogoro has now set its sights on expanding in China, India, and Southeast Asia, where hundreds of millions of people depend on bikes and scooters for mobility. Are we finally going to see a tipping point for electric scooters? And what implications does it have on the future of mobility in this region? Horace, welcome to the EB podcast, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jessica. It's nice to be here today.
Excellent. Firstly, huge congratulations on getting Gogoro listed on the Nasdaq. Perhaps we can start off with that. What was that feeling like after founding this company back in 2011?
Well, we founded the company back in 2011, as you said, really with an idea that we're going to enable the regions around Asia and mega cities around the world to really adopt EV. The biggest challenge with EV adoption in cities like Jakarta, like Ho Chi Minh City, or like Taipei, or like other many large growing cities around the Asia area, is usability and feasibility of such an adoption, right? So thousands and thousands of people living on top of each other in a building, you can't even find a place to park. How are you going to find a place to charge? Well, we all know that EV is inevitable. It is going to happen. And so a little over 10 years ago, we had this idea that how about we just, break the paradigm and shift it toward a battery swapping model instead of a battery ownership model where you're going to have to find places to charge and manage your battery. And so the whole idea has been to kind of create both a technology and also a business model breakthrough. And in Taiwan, we've been able to do that and demonstrate that since 2015. And over the last 5-6 years, we've been able to actually grow the electric vehicle adoption from less than 1% when we entered it, to now well over 10-11% when you're talking about the entire island of Taiwan. But if you're talking about in the Taipei city alone, in the city proper, we're about a quarter of the market. So 1 out of every 4 vehicles sold no longer is ICE driven or gasoline powered, but now electric powered. Now, perhaps the most impressive is that out of that 25-26%, we're now talking about 95% market share in that electric being battery swapping. So battery swapping is clearly proven to be a game changer. And now with well over 6 or 7 different vehicle makers in Taiwan, all using our platform to create electric vehicle, we're not only the game changer now, but we're really the de facto standard. So, and when you ask how does it feel to bring that that success story, and also at the same time looking at growing to other countries to the Nasdaq, has been amazing. The reception has been great. We've always thought that it was going to be a challenge to let the people of the West realize that there are well over 500 million of these two-wheelers rolling around in these cities, when most of the people in the New York, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco area all look at two-wheelers and says they're recreational, right? And so we always thought that was going to be that would be a challenge. But the more and more we engage with investors and the community in around the Nasdaq, we've starting to realize that everybody's looking at this entire planet as a blue ball. Solving the electric vehicle problem and the pollution problem and congestion problem in the West doesn't mean that we have solved it for the world. And having this opportunity to not only, represent the East going into Nasdaq and listing, but also at the same time creating the resources that we need to actually make the effective change and the impact that we're going to do in these, cities that we're growing into has been an amazing milestone. But, we all look at it, all 2,000 of us at Gogoro look at it as really a starting point, as an enablement for us to actually now have the resource, now have the manpower and the brand recognition and the transparency and the governance to be able to create a world-class company going to these mega cities around the world.
Super fascinating, and huge congrats again. I mean, for an Asian unicorn to list on the Nasdaq and to also be, I guess, a game-changing disruptor of that EV battery swapping industry, that must have been super difficult. I mean, and I know the entrepreneur journey is fraught with challenges. If I could get you to name just one of the biggest challenges that you faced, what was it? Was it regulatory? Was it, lack of funding, or was it technical? I mean, we would love to hear your experience.
Quite honestly, it was the lack of traveling. We did the entire deal. We did the entire merger with Polima. They've been great to work with. They have a long track record of working with, with companies from all different stages in their life cycle. And Princefield Capital, the team from there, created Polima. And Polima has been great to work with. Homer and Joaquim and the rest of the team has been great. But the biggest surprise probably to everybody is we've never met in person. We've met everybody through Zoom. Now, that said, we picked the SPAC route because it really, if for those entrepreneurs that are listening, they're, obviously going listing, you meet with investors, 20 to 30 minutes at a time. You in and out meetings. And that makes it really difficult to communicate the complexity of the problem that we're trying to solve, but also at the same time, the comprehensiveness of our solution. And so 20 minutes, 30 minutes doesn't do it justice. So we end up picking the SPAC route to merge with a SPAC instead of going to the formal, kind of traditional IPO route, because we get the chance to do the homework and get the chance to actually have that interaction on a long-term basis, right? To be able to have 4 to 6 months of really long-term study and due diligence in the company to understand the nuances in which we're creating. But perhaps like Jessica, you and I can have a chemistry on camera, but at the same time, when you're talking about, taking a company public, usually having a one-on-one meeting with another person in the room, you actually can see, you can see the eye movement, you can see the body gesture. Those are the really difficult things that I would say to communicate what we're trying to do. And it took a little bit longer than we anticipated, but at the same time, we're actually being able to effectively create the entire listing without a single minute of travel. And that was a challenge, but also at the same time, the benefit of it all, because we get to focus on bringing up these markets we're talking about.
What I want to ask you is that there have been a few unicorns that have listed, and then because of the stock market uncertainty and volatility, whether it's pandemic or the Russia-Ukraine war, the tech stocks have been, kind of moving up and down. And a lot of unicorn and SPAC listing have actually dropped below their listing price. Is this something that concerns you, or what is your take on it?
Well, we look at valuation of a company as a reflection of business fundamental. And so, whether or not it is, the market is doing great or the market is not doing great, I think that the difference that that makes us a little different than everybody else is that when you're looking at a lot of sustainability tech out there today, they're not really strong in the business fundamental yet. It's rare to find a company that is, for example, we've been EBITDA positive since 2019. We were very close to break even and, generating profit back in 2019. And the ability for us to build this entire, I would say, R&D technology capability inside Taiwan today, and then take it and prototype it and pilot it, only to take all that and copy and paste into other much larger markets. So if you think about the market I just, that you were just mentioning, right? You got China, you got India, you got, perhaps Indonesia that we're now piloting in. Those 3 markets and those 3 countries alone add up to be about 65 million units a year in, addressable TAM when it comes to unit vehicles sold. Taiwan, only 700,000. So you're talking about 80, 90 times what we're doing in Taiwan. But at the same time, as I go and turn on these stations and battery swapping stations, for example, in China, soon to come in India, and then already a pilot in Jakarta, we've been able to leverage all the resources and all the technology we developed here in Taiwan to go outbound without actually increasing too many headcounts or too many teams domestically in order to bring that up. So the efficiency, you'll see us, as a company, the efficiency will continue to improve as we scale. And that is perhaps a lot different than other companies out there that are I always kind of wonder, right? Some of the companies out there are even pre-technology, right? They're pre-technology, pre-revenue, pre-EBITDA, kind of pre-partnership. And of course, they're going to be the strong companies, and they're going to be the companies that are, I think, they're all going to come in and out and up and down with the market. But I think a company like Gogoro has very strong business fundamental, and we're able to demonstrate that through the last several years, even like you said, weathering through the pandemic, where there's a lot of market uncertainty. But all we know is we're doing great, and we're continuing to push forward and take our technology and bring it to those markets that we just mentioned.
I think that, being EBITDA positive is something that investors look for, and there have been many unicorns that have listed that haven't been able to demonstrate that. And it's a nice segue into your regional expansion, India, China, Southeast Asia. Where do you think are going to be some of the roadblocks that you're going to see before you can get over the hump, per se, and to really see the tech being scaled up in these countries?
Well, bringing up a market where you're trying to create a solution that's going to kind of retire the old way of doing for, let's say, 50, 60 years, right? Ever since we grew up, we always were told, if you need fuel, you go to a gas station, right? Doesn't matter if you grew up on the East or the West or wherever you grew up, fuel equals gas station equals mobility. And we were able to, in Taiwan, be able to overcome all that. Right. And that's our domestic market. It took 6 years to do that. When we started in Taipei, there was only 31 stations. By the end of this year alone, at the beginning of this year, when we started, we had more locations than gas station in the major cities around Taiwan. By the end of this year, on the island of Taiwan, we'll have more location and stations than gas stations and the entire island. Right. We were able to do what the gas station did in 50 years in just 5 years. However, that took 5 years, right? From nothing at all to now, having a usability that's so convenient, so prolific, so you don't have to think about it kind of usability, right? And markets like China, markets like India, markets like, Indonesia, that is going to take time to develop. And so our first step is really to pilot in those markets, create the partnerships locally to deploy, but also at the same time, working with these large giants, vehicle makers, to use our technology to enable their success in their portfolio. So a great example of that would be, for example, in China, we're already deploying in Hangzhou, in Wuxi, and Kunming, working with 2 large vehicle makers, one of which is the largest electric two-wheeler maker, Yadi, in China. Last year, they sold 13.8 million vehicles, way over the amount that we sold. But at the same time, they're seeing battery swapping as not only a safer solution, but a more intimate solution they can have with their customer, right? Because the vehicle is swapping on the network, so we're able to actually have a better relationship with the customer. So that offers a lot more for them rather than traditional box-moving vehicles that charge at home. We're also working in China with Dachangjiang Haojue, which is the largest ICE two-wheel maker in China. And together, we're deploying these stations in Hangzhou, Wuxi, and Kunming. And also at the same time, working with large vehicle makers like Hero MotoCorp in India, the world's largest ICE two-wheel maker, to later this year, closer to the end of the year, deploy in India, would only start making some traction in I would say, in these hard, really, really, I would say, overwhelming market. but when it works, it really works, and so it will take time. It will take time for us to deploy and get the adoption. But, like I said, we start with 31 stations in Taiwan, and very quickly scale to 200 something. Now today, we have well over 2,000 locations with more than 10,000 cabinets. We just shipped our 1 millionth battery, on the network. All of it was backward and forward compatible. So the user is just super happy on our network. And we're ready to take this, knowledge and this, business know-how and technology into these large markets and scale in those markets.
That's super fascinating. On China, I can't help but ask, whether the geopolitical tensions between the countries you think would be, business often are a victim of some of these tensions. And where do you see that going?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one is when we started the company, we never thought about, political tensions or geopolitical situation. I think, the Earth is we have one planet, and everybody's working towards solving that. Now, whether you work on downstream or upstream or the technology side, on the product side, I think everybody's working on the same team. And so the way I look at it is, very similar to what I just told you about how our partnership with those, local partners, they are really using our technology, licensing our technology to be able to create their solution. So it's really a teamwork, right? And so, when we look at the all the markets we're going into, we're going to look at partnership driven. And then we are going to be more like, think of us as really the Android of EV. Today, we have, in our network today in Taiwan and also across the world, we have over 10 vehicle makers all using our network, 9+1, we're being the first one, but, 9+1, very similar to how Google used to build the Nexus phone, right? And now you got LG, you got HTC, you got Samsung, you got a number of different phone makers, all building on top of the Android platform. But Android in Google demonstrating the first wave of product. We kind of adopted a similar thing. Everybody's going to use battery swapping. We think the battery swapping is going to be the game changer. But at the same time, we created a portfolio that demonstrates how to do it, how you can, how it is possible. And then later on, bring that technology and enable others to build vehicles that are going to be fitting within their demographic of users they want to address, and then creating vehicles in the style and brand and the distribution channel that they're used to and accustomed to, right? And then so therefore creating a vehicle that then come back to our network and use battery swapping. So that's kind of our business model. And I think that overall, because of that, I think we'll see less of the geopolitical, impact that we're going to have, because we are really partner driven. Instead of kind of ourselves going in and taking all the risk by ourselves. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to use our business logic, use our technology, use our capability, use our IP to really help our partners transition. So it's kind of like help you, help me, help you, help me, help the planet, and that's kind of what we end up building.
That's a really lovely sentiment. You speak so passionately about technology, and obviously you've come with decades of experience in that sector. You were formerly the Chief Innovation Officer at HTC and then Creative Director of Microsoft. How has those, experiences influenced your journey at Gogoro in terms of the technological know-how?
Yeah, I've been actually very fortunate. I'm kind of a jack of all trade, master of, a little bit here and there, but not of all. So I've been actually being able to go everything from product design to technology to software to marketing to network creation. And overall, I would say that the little bit of learning along the way added up to this critical moment. Back when I just turned, I turned 41 when I started this company. I'm over 50 now because I've been at it for 10 years. But when I started, it was really a pivotal moment at age 40 to say, well, am I going to spend the rest of the time dreaming about what I can do, for a large earthquake, hold on.
Oh dear. Yeah. Oh my goodness, please stay safe.
We're on the 12th floor, so it's a big shake at the moment. Okay.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
All right, here we go.
Wow.
Right, a lot of people in the sustainability tech sector will focus on either technology or for product or for manufacturing or for us, we're kind of a little bit of everything, because what we're trying to do is so comprehensive, right? So if you think about what we do, we try to create, we're creating not only the battery swapping infrastructure. We actually build our own battery. We not only build our own battery, we build a factory and the technology behind the factory to build the battery so we can actually build the infrastructure, right? When we started, there was nobody building a motor that was going to be convincing enough and strong enough and powerful and long lasting enough to to overcome the demanding use case of the ICE 125cc vehicles that are so popular in cities that you're familiar with, that I'm familiar with in Yeast, that everybody basically looked at me and said it can't be done. And so we ended up building our own team, building our own factory, building our own technology. And today we're still the largest maker of motors of this class. Nobody else could be able to do it. We, at the end, we have all the components, all the technology. And then we said, how about you build the vehicle, right? And everybody says, you can't build a vehicle and sell that. That would never work. Nobody will ever buy a vehicle that actually does battery swapping. And so we said, okay, if you say no, we'll build it too. And so we end up building everything along the way. And then we're trying to say, okay, well, you know what, let's try to get somebody else to sell it for us, right? After we build it, we sell it for us. And, to be honest with you, the first guy that we came up to, he said, yeah, I have my channel, but, to sell it, I take 45% margin. 45% margin. I said, I'll do that myself, And so hence, little bit by little bit by little bit, we have a very comprehensive team, a lot of technology that helps us, market and be able to, kind of connect with our customers at the same time, all the way upstream to actually create the technology and create the product that is needed to build this kind of chicken and egg ecosystem that we got. And because of that, I would say, we're very different than other companies out there. And perhaps, other companies sees us, other partners see us as a, for them, it's a great thing to leverage because we've done it all. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. So they're saying, hey, let's, okay, before you couldn't convince me to build the vehicle. Now let me convince you to let me use your battery swapping technology because we've seen it work. Today in Taiwan, we have about 500,000 subscribers on our network, swapping, hundreds of thousands times a day, and literally the whole thing is fully automated. Consumer just rides up to one of the station, plop the battery in. We see how much energy they've used, whether or not they have enough, whether or not they pay the bills. And if they pay the bills, another battery, within seconds just swaps out and then off they go, literally that quick. And no charging, no hassle. You don't have to worry about owning the battery and then maintaining the battery. We do all that for you. And on the network side is fully, we built all the cloud and AI server that manages all these stations real time. And so that has been kind of what we've been hard at work on for the last 6 years. And we're ready to take that and now kind of copy and paste it into these large markets. We brought up Jakarta, and now, with GoTo, have several hundred vehicles, looking to scale that to a couple thousand vehicles very quickly here. In Jakarta, providing the Gojek guys a very convenient usability. But at the same time, it took really no time at all to bring up the network. We didn't fly one single person over from our side. We send the equipment, we send the vehicle, we taught them over video Zoom again, right? And how to actually wire it up and how to use it. And like that, off it went. And
that's amazing.
And the riders are using the swapping network. And so really it's all of this is because we've been actually really diligently going through and improving and creating technology that makes what we're doing fully automated. And that is something that, I would say that this is definitely the decade of electric mobility. Everybody's talking about it. By the end of, the great thing is, like, for example, in Taiwan, governments are actually putting good strong stakes in the ground. Like, for example, in Taiwan, by 2030, by this end of this decade, they're saying 35% of vehicles needs to be electric versus ICE. By 2035, 35%, 70%. Right, another 35%. And then by the end of 2040, they are going to demand that 100% of all vehicles sold needs to be electric, right? And that's a great, great indicator that we're heading toward this direction. And it's similar to, like, you called it out earlier. I started working on smartphones back in early 2000s. I know I sound like, a long time ago, early 2000s. When everybody says smartphone, that was the age of, when BlackBerry started, right? You got email already, and you got your computer. Why do you need the internet in your phone, in your phone and in your pocket? And I've always thought computing, when it's mobile, is going to change people's lives. Just like today, if you come to Taiwan and you stand on the side of the street and you just realize when there's, when the street has just electric vehicle going by versus a traditional gas vehicle going by, the difference in the sound, the noise it makes, the difference in the heat it generates, the difference in the smell that you can smell in the air because of the gas, and the pollution that you can feel on your skin when you go home. It's just very different. And I'm eager to bring what we have done successfully in Taiwan onto, markets like Indonesia, markets like India, where, pollution, the air is poisonous in India, right? We've got to make a change. And, at age 40, I need to make a decision. Am I going to go do this thing that I always want to do? Or am I going to actually just continue on as a professional? And so I'm happy to be here today to say, I picked the non-professional professional route, where I'm creating a movement, creating, a sustainable business and technology that will take advantage of the fact that we're all now aware of the need of electric mobility, but none of us know how to overcome it. And I hope that Gogoro will be the one to demonstrate that what we're doing actually makes a huge difference and is the game changer that will change that to easy to adopt, easy usability, where, you no longer have to worry about range when you're swapping, right? Charging, you're going to worry about the how long you have, how long it takes to go home when you go outbound, right? And how long it's going to take to charge. And then also, the worst of all is really, having to buy the battery when you buy the vehicle, right? Everything is compromised because the battery cost on the vehicle is about 40% of the vehicle cost. So now you have 40% less to work with when it comes to technology or reliability or safety. But with our equation, we don't include the battery in the vehicle, so the consumer never had to be burdened with it. So instead, we use that bill of material cost to translate to innovations such as smart connectivity, right? Sensors, safety, precautions, like traction control or like ABS system on our vehicle. So adding more value to the consumer, but at the same time providing a usability that will benefit them, so that when they use the vehicle, they can enjoy the vehicle for a much longer time. And that's perhaps the really big breakthrough that we made here in the last couple of years.
That's great to hear, Horace. I think you've said in previous interviews that Gogoro is not just an EV company, that is an infrastructure company. And I can see how all these pieces are coming together to create the ecosystem. And I think timing is also of the essence, right? Because you've mentioned the decade of electromobility, and really with the net zero targets and the focus on climate change and air pollution, really this is it. And maybe I can just segue this into a broader question around climate tech in Asia, because I think, Asia as a region has typically lagged behind the US and Europe. And, in particular, for example, there was a record 17 billion in venture capital that was pumped into the climate tech space. And the climate tech deal size as well has quadrupled even during the pandemic. But in Asia, it attracted not even a tenth of that VC funding that the US attracted, for example. Why do you think that is so? And do you foresee that Asia will be the next giant and there's going to be a lot more capital coming into this region?
I think, the key word here is the word technology. Are you developing technology, or are you actually deploying the technology? Of course, with deploying technology, I think that we do see some benefits in Asia, right? Because cost of capital is less than that of the West. It's easier access to that kind of asset-heavy capital that people are used to, accustomed to. But when you're talking about VCs, they're looking for technology development. People that actually from zero develop brand new technology that can actually create climate change. And I think one of the things that there's been lacking is that development side of it. And that's one of the reasons, I think at the beginning, at the top of the hour, you said, Horace, the Taiwanese, businessman. I'm actually not from Taiwan. I actually grew up in Hong Kong. I moved to the United States, and I grew up in the United States starting my early teens. And when I had to pick a place where I could develop the technology, that I foresee to be a hardware and software kind of overlapping each other to create this new technology, there was one natural place. I picked Taiwan because of that. Because in Taiwan, I could develop that technology and, and kind of develop it along the way. And that's, that perhaps is kind of the new era of this sustainable technology that you were talking about. When you talk about pure software, yes, the West is better at it, right? The Silicon Valleys, the Sand Hill Road, the California neighborhoods, and along with Seattle and Portland, they're great with, in Austin with great technologists there, but they're really focused around software. But if you need to take software and combine with hardware, there really isn't many places on this planet that you can do that, and that's one of the reasons I picked up and anchor myself in Taiwan, because this is where I can actually build it. And over the last couple of years, not only did we build it a couple of years ago, but I've refined it over time in Taiwan. And that is perhaps a very, I would say, a unique situation where we think about holistically, hardware, software, infrastructure, and usability. And then at the same time, having, being able to generate cost-effective capital, in debt and others, in order to kind of build this pilot that we're talking about, right? And then once we built that pilot, we now got this kind of end-to-end convincing model that we can now show, show partners. Because before, when we were showing partners, they're like, look at this Excel spreadsheet. Well, everybody can build Excel spreadsheet, right? Theoretically, everything is perfect. But can you really demonstrate that people are happy, that your technology is safe, is easy to use and adopt, and that, that when you say you're enabling others to build the vehicles, did you do it? And can you do it? And are they happy with it? And I can tell you that working with people like Suzuki Taiwan or, Yamaha out of Japan, it wasn't easy, but it was necessary to demonstrate how flexible and how enabling our technology is, so that they can build vehicles that uses our network for the consumer to swap and go. And so all in all, I think, we're when you ask, are the venture capital going to come here? I think depending on what they're coming for, technology development is something that venture capital venture capital seeks at. And then if you're talking about technology deployment, maybe that's where growth capital and later stage capital comes in.
That's super interesting, because we actually launched a new fund late last year called the Sustainable Future Fund. And it's a VC fund that's, investing into Series A companies that are sustainability driven. But when we talk to potential LPs, there's always this uncertainty about Asia, regulatory risk or capital risk or technology risk and so on. And it's so interesting that you said you picked Taiwan because of that combination of hardware and software. Do you think then that only the developed cities like Taiwan, Singapore, can kind of host these innovation hubs, and to develop this climate tech? Are we going to see more of it coming from the developed cities, or is it going to come across like the whole of Asia?
I think I'm seeing pockets here and there, right? Pockets here and there. And I think it really takes, for example, for us, getting, people that actually can do machine learning and AI, right? To pivot towards sustainability instead of doing marketing and advertising, right? And, convincing developers to go do that wasn't easy. But I think that what we are all seeing is that this is the decade for electric mobility, and that it is either you're going to do it, or I'm going to do it, or the guy next to us is going to do it. It is going to happen. The question is who's going to lead it. And I think the difference, what we picked was, we picked a segment that perhaps the West don't really yet realize the potential of. When you think about, two-wheelers, most people in the West think, recreational, I'm riding my Harley, I'm riding my Ducati out to the mountain, get away from the wife, or get away from the kids, or get away from my husband, whatever the reason it is, they ride the two-wheelers and they don't think about commute, right? Or the necessity of it. Well, like I said, over 500 million two-wheelers are around the world. I mean, just to show you and demonstrate how important this is, over 50% of all commute miles done every day is done on two-wheelers around the world. Over 50%.
Wow.
And in some place like India, for example, 80% of all commute miles done every day is done on two-wheelers. 60% of all gasoline that's spent every year is spent putting in these two-wheelers. This is where people take their kids to school, where they go, go to work, or they go to school, or they go to the market and pick up essential items. This is the mobility tool of choice. Maybe not quite of choice, but the only option they have, right? Because you can't find a place to park. It's too chaotic in the city. So four-wheeler is really a luxury item, right? Than an essential utilitarian, vehicle. And so, we picked a sector that we are familiar with, that we believe that we got a head start because other people didn't. And since then has created quite a technology moat and also business know-how moat around this technology, because we were so early in moving toward the space. When I started back in 2011, nobody was talking about, nobody was talking about electric two-wheelers. I don't think Tesla even announced the Model S at the time. It was really the Roadster, right? It was a toy car at the time. And, nevertheless, talking about battery swapping. When I first started, people were like, battery swapping, what are you talking about? That would never work. And then, first set of customer came in and said, when you go bankrupt, who owns the battery? It's kind of like saying,
oh dear.
It's like kind of going to somebody's, wedding celebration and say, oh, when you guys divorce, who owns the couch, right? It was kind of, people just didn't believe it would work. But now we're seeing people adopting at a rate that is phenomenal, right? And this is where now other markets, as you mentioned, which is a little behind, maybe perhaps where we are today, will quickly catch up. And then we can't wait to see these guys come up with, kind of business model and their own technology based on battery swapping, to be able to make their cities better. One great example of that is, it is still a Taiwan partner. We worked on a smart parking pole that allows us, a lot of times people say, oh, when your battery gets old, after 10 years, what do you do to recycle them? And I said, recycle? Why would I recycle them? I would reuse them until the very last minute, until I need to recycle them, right? And so what we're doing is now looking into new technology and new usable scenarios and situations where you can use these portable batteries. So we made these, made it with our partner, these smart parking meter pole that has camera, that has connectivity, that has sensors, that all you have to do is swap out a battery every 27 days. And then because you're swapping out the batteries, no longer do you actually need to run the wire on the ground. You just literally go up to a city block, as long as the city government wants to deploy it, bolt it all down. And we're in the middle of now deploying, well over 1,000 of these poles in a couple of these cities around Taiwan to kind of, again, to develop the technology, develop the system, develop the know-how. So now all of a sudden, every street can become a smart street, right? And that is what we're doing to enable cities like Jakarta, like, Dubai, like Mumbai, like Delhi, to be able to now create their own solution and their own smart city infrastructure. And that's something that we're excited about. We believe we're really a technology platform more than, we're a product platform or even a network platform. Fundamentally, we believe that portable power is going to change cities forever, whether it's mobility or connectivity or sensor. When you have batteries that are portable and that can swap out, we can do a lot of amazing things with it.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because one of the criticisms of EVs is that it's not recyclable and that, it takes a lot of energy and resources to build. So the circularity of the EV charging solution is so important, and to constantly put it back into the cycle is, something that is a priority.
And that's one reason why we picked two-wheelers instead of four-wheelers. If you think about four-wheelers, the resources it takes to build a four-wheel electric car, you're not only building the vehicle. Instead of two wheels, you got to build four. Instead of a simple seat, you have to build a front sofa and a back sofa, right? And then you have to add your stereo. You have to add your steel body around it. You have to add your mirrors and glass and all that stuff around it, right? And air conditioner. The amount of carbon footprint it takes to generate an electric car, and by the time you actually charge and offset that carbon, you're talking about 30, 40,000 miles into it, or 60 or 70,000 kilometers into it, I mean, that's a lot of usage of that just to kind of break even.
Mm-hmm.
But in the two-wheeler is very different, right? You know,
Yes.
from your part of the world, from my part of the world, we've seen people, a family of, you know, although it's illegal, a family of 4 people, like Cirque du Soleil style on a vehicle, right? And with a fraction of the resource it took to build that vehicle. That was sustainability is in the heart of every decision that we make at Gogoro. You know, everything from suppliers I pick, right? And the footprint they have. And when you come to my factory, you'll see a lot of, you know, kind of collapsible and reusable racks. So that when they do deliver the parts to our factory, we are collapsing the rack and then going back out and going into their factory for the next churn, right? Of parts coming in. And then how many, you know, what is our painting process? What is our plating process? What is our environmental proofing process? You know, all of that goes into consideration when we build the vehicle. So we pick the form factor and a choice of vehicle that actually uses a fraction of the footprint to build the vehicle. But also on top of that, we scrutinize every part that comes in. And then afterward, you know, as you see the batteries on the network, you know, a lot of people, you know, battery dies because of neglect, to be honest with you, right? Some people overcharge them and keep them topped up all the time. Some people actually exhaust the battery and the battery goes kapluk, right? And they die. Well, the difference is that we manage the battery during this process the whole time. So when you put it out back on our station, we know exactly how fast, how much, when to charge these batteries so that the batteries now are in the best healthy condition. When we first started, we were trying to convince our CPA that we could actually depreciate these batteries over a much longer period than they thought it was going to be, or what the world thought was 2 or 3 years. And we said, no. That's because average consumers don't know how to manage the battery. And in our particular case, using the AI server, the machine learning server, we're able to monitor every battery on the network and condition and charge them in the pattern that's best for them, right? And so therefore, hence extending the life. And then not only is it after extending life, we scrutinize afterward and say, you know, what are we going to do next? Are we going to go and figure out how to recycle this? And a couple of us were the first to step up and said, no, we're not going to recycle these. What we're going to do is reuse them and trying to squeeze out the very last drop of them, not because it makes perfect business sense to do so, right? Which it does, but it makes perfect sustainability sense to do so. So that sustainability is about how do you maximize the return that you get through the minerals and through the resources you take from the ground and from the planet, right? And how do you use that to the longest way possible? Absolutely. And then we even, you know, the day we were brainstorming, it's like, okay, now we've got kind of some of the use case of the second life situation figure out. What are we going to do when they cannot be powering, like, you know, traffic light now, or backing up traffic light, or powering the smart pole, you know? And a couple of us raised our hand and said, but they're still good for, like, you know, turning a light on to read a book. How about enabling, you know, kids in Africa, kids in India to be able to have education? Right, to bring these batteries really literally down to the last drop before they go to recycle. And that's something that we're as a company, and the core culture of our company, believe so much in. And then we develop technology around it, right? So, you know, a lot of companies out there today are just really kind of building around greenwashing. You know, I can too, and I can too, and I can too. But, you know, I think what a couple of us that started this company believe in this so much that we dive so deep into it and figure out, not only does it make financial sense, but we need to find something that makes sustainability sense. And so, you know, I mean, one of our you know, investors, you know, former Vice President Al Gore, who, you know, of course, is a Nobel Prize winner for climate, you know, climate change issues. You know, he's always said to me, he said, you know, do good, do well, have fun doing it. And that's, you know, if you can get the consumer engaged, right, and businesses engaged, if you can build a sustainable business that is around sustainability, then you got a future. But if you can't build, you know, if you can't build a sustainable business and you can't get the consumer excited about it, it's just charity work, right? And so what we're really focused on is engaging the consumer and businesses partners to actually embrace it and create a fundamental business, you know, business architecture that actually is sustainable, that shows a positive, you know, P&L in the, you know, although not day one, but in the future, it can show a positive P&L, right?
Yeah.
That it doesn't have total dependency on, on subsidies and other government, funding. And that what we're building is a business model that can actually scale and has much larger market to scale into, right? And I just mentioned, right, those countries we're going into is 80, 90 times the size that we are today, right? And we just look forward to what we're going to be building over the next 24 months into those markets.
Excellent. You, as my ending question, some advice that you would give to climate tech entrepreneurs in Asia, but you've put it and summed it so nicely. I mean, but any, kind of last thoughts on any advice you would give to entrepreneurs who are in this journey as well with you, and what's next for you?
Yeah, I think, the number one thing is, don't copycat. Don't take the shortcut.
Okay.
Just because somebody did it doesn't mean that you should do it. Somebody paved the way doesn't mean that you should follow. As an entrepreneur, you should take a problem and say, how hard is the problem? And the harder the problem, the better it is, the more rewarding it is to solve it, and the more necessary it is to solve it. So, I always have team members come to me and say, hey, Horace, this is super tough. And I said, I'm sorry, but all the easy ones are taken by other people already. So we only get to pick from the tough ones. And, by solving tough problems, we're going to create a barrier and a moat that is much stronger against other competitors coming in, right? And so when we first started, believe me, when we first started, I was a company that was only 27 desks. I thought I was just going to build the software around battery swapping. And as we quickly discovered after starting the office, we figured, man, nobody's building the battery. We have to build that. Nobody's building the swap station. We're going to build that too. What do you mean nobody's building the vehicle? Let's go build that. And kind of that naiveness, but also at the same time, the determination to win and determination to be successful enable us to create all these things, all these components that maybe perhaps other people are not willing to invest or take our challenges on. So my advice is the tougher the problem, the better it is to solve. Because at the end, it'll be much more rewarding, either financially or in your heart, knowing that you solved a tough problem. And that is, perhaps my I would say my advice for any of the entrepreneurs listening to our, to our podcast today. Because what is so difficult to do, the hard way is the better way. Because at the end, you can create something that's unique, that is yours, and that can actually make a difference when other people are not willing to do it.
Thank you so much, Horace, on that super inspirational note. I think it's time for us to end this podcast. I've learned so much from you just in that short hour. Thank you so much for being our guest here today. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as well.
Thanks, Jessica. I look forward to talking again.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, listeners, for listening to the EB podcast. For more coverage on these issues, do check out our website, ecobusiness.com, and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Spotify. Our podcast editor today is Benjamin Wong, and I'm Jessica Chiam. Till next time.